Thanks for joining us on Capitol View. I'm Fred Martino. This week, the University of Chicago is one of many higher education institutions under investigation by the Trump administration over diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Illinois Governor JB Pritzker speaks out against federal cuts to the Department of Education, and the Trump administration has pulled grant funding from Illinois fair housing organizations that investigate discrimination. Those stories and much more with Andrew Adams from Capitol News, Illinois, and Kent Redfield, Emeritus Political Science Professor at the University of Illinois, Springfield. Andrew, up front this week, amid a major budget deficit, Governor Pritzker cut an immigrant health care program from his proposed budget. The Chicago Tribune told stories of some of those affected.
Yeah, so the really excellent reporting in the Tribune, and I'd encourage anyone to go read it, found that there are folks affected by this program who will lose health insurance because of the proposed cut in Governor Pritzker's plan. There's an estimated 30,000 people who will lose health insurance because of this proposed cut, but that has to be weighed against potentially $330 million in savings for the state by not having this program. And that comes at a very important time for the state, which is facing, a very tight budget year. For the first, 6 or 7 budgets that Governor Pritzker proposed, it was mostly the good times for budget planning. There was a lot of federal money coming in from the pandemic, from aid programs, from big infrastructure bills. But for the first time, it's a pretty tight year, meaning they're looking for places to cut. And this program has been very controversial in Springfield and around the state. Both, ideologically, folks opposed to, certain kinds of immigration have used it as a talking point, and it has been somewhat mismanaged. It has vastly exceeded its initial cost estimates, about 4 times higher than initially planned, and like I said, cutting it could save $330 million.
Yes, it's a very good reporting, as you said, in the Chicago Tribune, though, looking at the impact of this on individuals. And of course, this may only be the beginning of challenges for the state of Illinois and for the entire country, as there is an expectation that there may be federal cuts to Medicaid as well, which will affect many more people across the country. Kent, lots of programs, of course, are being affected by Trump administration actions, and the Chicago Tribune reported on this as well. The University of Chicago, one of the schools, being investigated for its work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What did you learn?
Well, this is a pretty broad-based effort. We're talking 50, 60 universities, depending on what particular aspects of this that the Trump administration has been putting their effort on it. Just for context, we started with a decision in the Supreme Court that essentially overruled affirmative action, and basically in terms of admissions. And that basically was just that. It was higher ed admissions. Now, with the new Trump administration, we've kind of, and their efforts to cut back or eliminate diversity, equity, inclusion, which are initiatives that go way beyond just admissions kinds of issues in terms of who gets into the university, but then what are your programs academically, student life? I mean, it's very broad. And so you have these executive orders on top of the decision that dealt just with college admissions. And now we're projecting that out into what universities have been doing, not only in terms of admissions, but then in terms of their hiring program, student groups within the university. And then there's a third aspect to this, which is with the student unrest, the protests involving the attack by Hamas and the war in Gaza. Then there is a lot of attention being applied to, focus on how have universities dealt with protests and the issues of anti-Semitism. And so you've really got a whole bunch of things up in the air without, a lot of clarification, although now the Department of Education is starting to specify exactly how they want to see this general, thrust of decisions applied to universities. And so we're not only looking at admissions programs, like there's a private group that funds minority students to attend college in business areas, and universities have partnered with this group. The Department of Education is calling into question about whether or not that's appropriate for universities to partner with a group that is providing support specifically to minority students. And so, it relates to academic programs, it relates to anti-Semitism issues in terms of, what are your rules and regulations involving protests, free speech, and then is this in terms of the general initiatives about removing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in a more general sense and putting pressure on universities to do that. Then we now have decisions involving, is it appropriate for the university to provide support and physical space for a Black student union, which have been activities and groups that have been, have a long history of presence on college campuses. And so,
thank you for the context on this, Kent, because people need to understand that in addition to the investigations, these actions are having a sweeping effect across the country as institutions, even that are not under investigation, are making changes, eliminating positions, eliminating programs, even eliminating certain words which they may fear might spark interest, like diversity, which is a word, of course, that is something that we try and strive in education to advance. We advance diversity in every form, but there are efforts to eliminate words from publications, websites, programs that are of a positive nature. And it is truly extraordinary, especially when you consider we're only talking about the last few months, the amount of changes. And Andrew, I need to move on to the next step, which is again, another nature of how extraordinary this is. Amid the investigations, the Trump administration is also dismantling the entire Department of Education. Illinois has joined a multi-state lawsuit over this. And Andrew, as you know, Governor Pritzker recently addressed the issue. Tell us more.
Yeah, so Illinois has joined with in a 20-state lawsuit, 20 states and the District of Columbia, in opposing, these massive cuts to the Department of Education. The lawsuit basically outlines, that these states, they're just not going to be able to enforce the law, particularly with regards to civil rights requirements, making sure that, everyone gets treated fairly in schools. They say that without oversight and funding from the Department of Education, these laws will go unenforced, and there just won't be a good answer on how to handle that. Now, the actual department, there's some concern about how this will affect funding, because it's a major player in the education space, but it's not a major funder, if that makes sense. So in Illinois, the Department of Education makes up about 12% of school spending. So, it's not missing half of the budget, but it certainly is a significant portion. And like you said, Governor Pritzker has voiced his opinion on this subject. Now, Governor Pritzker, often floated as a potential 2028 presidential candidate, sometimes gets very closely watched for his comments on national issues like this. And he called the folks supporting this initiative, if I'm remembering right, bootlickers and doge bags, referring to the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, he is one of the most outspoken Democrats with a national profile. It is quite stunning. And again, another thing that, from a political sense, we will have to watch, not only in terms of the efforts that may eventually be underway for what you just referenced, which is 2028, but also will that involve any retaliation in the future against Illinois because of this outspoken nature. Clearly, there are other folks who are quite concerned about being outspoken right now. Even there have been folks analysts saying that people feel like they have to be very careful. So it's fascinating, really, but also very scary, I would say, Andrew.
Absolutely. I'd say you're right. And Illinois, being a very blue state with a governor who's independently wealthy, doesn't have to rely too much on, public donations for his political career, is very insulated from some of those effects. But like you said, with so much federal funding coming to the state, the president has a history of withholding federal funding for any number of reasons.
And that's where we move now, actually, Andrew. Kent, in yet another impact from Trump administration actions, the federal government has pulled grant funding from Illinois fair housing organizations that investigate discrimination. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is a direct impact of the efforts to cut government costs. The Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, Doge. We have a cut or an elimination of a grant program that's been around since the 80s, going to non-for-profits that help people pursue complaints involving, housing discrimination on, race, sex, gender, disability, all of those sorts of things. And so this is not some kind of investigation. This is an action that was taken with money that was appropriated by Congress for a specific purpose. And the president, through the Doge, is asserting that he can pick and choose. He does not have to spend money that's appropriated for a particular purpose. And so, this has a big impact on one particular area, trying to enforce the federal and the state law involving housing discrimination. But it is, indicative of the things that have been going on in, it seems like forever, but it's been a relatively short period of time that the president has been in office to try to make huge cuts in the federal budget and spending in order to make the amounts balance and to have the kind of money that they need to finance some major tax cuts that they would like to see get done. So it's a local impact. It's certainly an important policy area, but the larger context is this is a fight between the president and people that believe that they had an authorization and appropriation from Congress to pursue activities that the president is refusing to to spend the money. And we're in court, and this is just stay tuned, and we'll see. This is who wins what's a really major significant battle.
Yes, yes. And as the courts work this out, the money is being taken away. So there is an immediate impact and very concerning to people in many areas of life around the country. Andrew, we return now to the state budget and an idea to raise more funding amid all of this uncertainty with the federal government and also the deficit the state has been facing. You can play the Illinois lottery online, sports betting is online, and now there is a proposal for other online gambling. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. Online gambling, it's sometimes called iGaming or iGambling, is basically allowing kind of any game you might encounter at a casino to be played online. Currently, there are some pretty tight restrictions on what is and isn't allowed virtually. It's basically, the whole list is basically what you said. You can use an online sports book like FanDuel or DraftKings, or play the state lottery. But most other gambling is restricted to in-person venues like casinos or video gaming machines, those kind of slot-like machines you might see at a gas station or a bar. Currently the state's gambling economy generates about $2 billion worth of tax revenue every year, which is pretty significant, particularly after the state hiked tax rates for sports betting last year. Proponents of this idea of legalizing online gambling, which includes some of the big companies behind the online sports betting, say that it could generate another $1 billion in state revenue. But there are some concerns that, one, that number might not be as high as they say, and two, it might not be worth it. There's a concern that legalizing online gambling would cannibalize the current revenue, meaning if everyone in the state has, let's say, a $500 budget to gamble every year, they're not going to magically have $200 extra to add to online casinos. They'll just say, okay, well, I'll spend $200 less on the lottery or whatever their game of choice is. And there's also a concern that legalizing online gambling would increase the rates of problem gambling, make more people gamble money that they might not necessarily have. Over the past few years, since we legalized online sports betting, an average amount, the per capita amount of money spent on gambling has increased from $360-ish to more than $500 per person in the state. And that is a number that not everyone is comfortable with.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
It'll be very fascinating to watch this and see what they do, because there certainly is a need for revenue, but you don't really know where it will lead, and would it even take money away from casinos? We just don't know. Kent, sticking with technology developments, artificial intelligence, AI, is moving into so many areas of our lives, but there is some real grave concerns over AI's influence on healthcare, and bills dealing with AI in online therapy and health insurance have advanced in House committees. Tell us more.
Yeah, so artificial intelligence obviously has exploded in terms of its impact on people's lives, and everybody seems to be using chatbots and those sorts of things. When you healthcare, these bills address a couple of specific things. One has to do with whether or not you can use artificial intelligence in terms of online mental health treatment. And so the concern is that you call up, you're in some kind of health crisis, and you're not talking to a person, you're talking to a chat bot that is has algorithms that are trying to deal with whatever you're presenting there, trying to get some help. And I don't, no one, I don't believe, thinks that the technology has gotten to the place where you can actually replace the doctor in terms of making decisions. The other one has to do with algorithms that are being used to evaluate insurance claims. Can something be covered? Can we pay for this? And a question here is, if you've got an algorithm that is weighted towards the concerns of the insurance company rather than the patient, you're going to get a systematic bias in terms of the way that it's designed. And so how we should regulate AI, exactly, where government, state, and federal should be stepping in. And, but this is not going away. It's just going to expand.
That's right. So it's good to see the interest, and we'll see where those bills go and what their effect will be. It'll be fascinating to watch. We only have about 3 minutes left, and Andrew, we get to end with you with a report of progress. What a relief after all those other stories. Capitol News Illinois wrote about improvements to the online licensing system for certain professions.
Yes. There are a lot of licensed professions in Illinois, so you might need a state license to, teach or be a nail technician or any number of other, fields of work. And in, let's say, 2023, the director of the state agency responsible for those licensing said that the backlog of people applying for a state license in their field was at crisis levels. It was just absolutely terrible to get through that process. Part of this was because of the pandemic and just knock-on effects of very quickly transitioning from a paper-based system to now it's the pandemic and we're not sure that that's the best idea. So the state said, okay, set up this online system to, have a quicker, more efficient way to get through these applications. And over the past year or so, they've set that system up and started rolling it out. They started with psychologists, music therapists, and nail technicians, and now they are expanding to all of the other professions that they license as they get ready in each particular field. And by all accounts, it's going fairly well. A state lawmaker who, has been around the block, he's been doing state policy stuff for 15 years, said that he had basically never seen anything roll out this well, and called it, if I'm remembering correctly, surreal, that it was just working, which is always good to see when a state policy like this to make it more efficient actually rolls out without a big hiccup. So we'll see if it continues. They have a lot of professions left to go.
Yeah, well, and good to see, because we talked about that for a long time, that it was a major problem and people were very frustrated. So it's good to see the progress, and good to end this show talking about progress. Kent and Andrew, as always, great to speak with both of you. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for making our work possible. That is Capitol View for everyone at WSIU. I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.